When graphing an inequality that's a line, you're going to start off by graphing the line the exact same way as if it was an equal sign, and then we have a couple extra steps. All right, so if we're going to graph the line in general, I can use the fact that we're going to begin at -2 because that's my y-intercept. And so I'm going to put a point there at -2 on my y-axis. And then I'm going to move based on the slope. Now, when you have a slope that's negative like this, you either want to put the negative with the top or the bottom. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to decide to go ahead and put the negative with the top. So I'm going to rise -1 and run +2. And I'm doing that from my beginning point. So right here is where I begin at -2, then rise -1 is down 1, and run +2 is right 2. Okay, so I've got my -2, rise -1, run 2. Now I'm going to graph my line here. And when I graph my line, I now need to decide based on whether or not there's an underline, if this line should be solid or dashed. Now, because this particular one, it has an underline, that means that this is going to be a solid line. So I'm going to keep that a solid line. If it was not underlined, I'd make this line dashed. The last thing that I need to do is decide whether or not I should shade below the line or above the line. The shading indicates that every point in the shading makes the original true. So I'm going to test a point, and you can test any point you want. You just want to make sure the point you test is clearly on one side of the line or the other. I like 0, 0 when I can use it, just because 0, 0 is usually an easier point to substitute. So I'm going to go with 0, 0. Taking my inequality y is less than or equal to -1/2 times x minus 2. I'm going to replace the x with 0, and I'm going to replace the y with 0. Simplify to see if it's true. -1/2 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 2 is -2. 0 is less than or equal to -2. That is not true. So that means that the point 0, 0 should not be included in the shading. So if we're not going to include it in the shading, we don't want to shade this direction. We want to shade this direction. So I'm going to come over and shade below the line. And every single point in this section makes the original true. Now there is a shortcut, and it only works if your y is on the left-hand side. But if the inequality says less than, what you can think of is, should you roll up or roll down? Well, less than would be rolling down. So I'm going to shade below, and then I wouldn't have to test the point. Okay, one last example here to make sure you have this one. Okay, so I start off by graphing the line as if it was y equals -x minus 3. The only difference is, because this one is not underlined, I'm going to graph it as a dashed line. I can begin at -3 because that's my y-intercept. So I'm going to take a point and come over here and go to -3 on my y-axis. Now in front of the x is a negative, and that's the same thing as -1. If I'm going to use that to move, I really need a fraction for the rise over run. So I'm going to put that -1/1. So from -3, I'm going to rise -1, which is down 1, run +1, which is right 1, and now I can draw in my line. Notice I've drawn it a dashed line because there's not an underline. Okay, then I need to decide, should I shade below or above? I'm going to go ahead and use the shortcut and then show you the solid math way here, but this symbol here is a greater than, and the y is on the left side. So greater than, I would want to take, if I put like a pencil or something on my line, I want to go up for greater than and down for less than. So greater than is up this direction, so I will end up shading up here. But technically, what we're doing is we're going to pick one point that's clearly above or below. If I select 0, 0 to test that out, then I would take the 0 here, substitute it in for the x, this 0 here, substitute it in for y. -1 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 3 is -3. So this leads to 0 is greater than -3, and 0 is bigger than -3. That's true. So that indicates that 0, 0 should be a part of the shaded region. So if I'm going to shade to include 0, 0, I'm shading above, which, using the shortcut, we already knew that greater than was going to lead us to shading above.